sometimes when we do life, I don't know if you can relate to me, but sometimes I think when we do life, we get distracted by so many things. And sometimes those distractions are good things. Sometimes those are things that are necessary in our life. And sometimes they're things that need to happen down the road. But sometimes those things can be distractions from enjoying the moments that God has given us right here. The future, I want to tell you, church, the future is bright. The future is incredible. It's things that God is going to reveal to us and open up. But sometimes we can look to what's coming and not enjoying where we are. And sometimes where we are is difficult. I can relate to that. Sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes there's things that are going on that we wish just weren't there. Maybe there's situations or circumstances you wish you could just change. If you could just have one thing to do to change those. And sometimes we miss, I hope you're hearing what I'm saying, sometimes we miss what God is doing right in the present. And sometimes we don't recognize it till later, like was shared here this morning. But I'm telling you, God is so real. And He's so eager to show up in our life. He is so eager to open up our future and our destiny. And He's more thrilled about what's coming around the corner than we could ever be, because He knows it. He's orchestrated. He's created it. But I want to encourage you, church. Let's begin to look in the now and see what God's doing now. In the midst of the disappointments, in the midst of, oh man, my life, it seems like has been just one disappointment after the other. But in the midst of those disappointments, I'm going to tell you today, church, I want to tell you, God is there. He's showing up. He's doing things in this behind the scenes sometimes. Sometimes it's not that visible. Sometimes we have to slow our life down and recognize what He's doing. Because I'm going to tell you, if you're here today and you have breath in your lungs and you have everything God's given you, He is there. He's there through the difficult moments. He's there when the challenges are seemingly to be the largest. He's there when we're filled more with questions than we have answers. He's there. I want to encourage you this morning. He is the God of I am enough, and He's the God of the impossible. So no matter what situation we surround ourselves in, I want to encourage you this morning. God is the God of the impossible. He's able to take the situation that we often get stuck in. I don't know about you. Do you get stuck in situations? I get stuck in situations. He's able to take those situations that keep us stuck, and He's able to sometimes breathe life into those things that all of a sudden, what was a difficulty, what was a struggle, what was a tragedy, what was something that seemed like a roadblock, all of a sudden becomes the pathway. That's what amazes me, church. That's what amazes me, is sometimes our greatest obstacle is actually really a door that opens up to another realm to our life. Yes. But we don't see it that way. We stand at the doorway and we wonder, when we'll ever get through? When will someone open it for us? Why am I at this doorway yet again in my life? I'm learning, church, and this is a hard lesson for me to learn. I'm learning that it's in those times of those obstacles and times of those limitations, which I want to speak about this morning. It's about in those times of uncertainty. It's in the times of those questions. It's in times of those frustration, and there's in those times of confusion that unlocks your destiny. It unlocks your destiny. You ever feel locked? You ever feel like a prisoner? Do you ever feel like you're just shackled with so many things, and it's like those calving ice, you know what I mean by calving ice? You know, you see that in Alaska where all of a sudden parts of the mountain falls, and the ice mountain, it keeps falling and falling, and they call that calving. It's like, that's sometimes like our life, it just, when is it gonna stop? But yet, when you take a look back, when you pay big money to be on those cruise ships, you want to see that, don't you? That's a spectacular moment where you can capture on camera this ice falling and splashing into the water, and it's like, this is incredible. I want us to start looking at our life like that. When it seems like things are falling apart, I want us to begin to notice, no, things are falling off because God wants to reveal who we really are. Who we really are. Because I'm telling you, I'm looking at a group of people in this church that have countless amounts of treasure in their life. And they're blinded by the circumstances and the situations. You're blinded by that. You're distracted by that. You don't see how beautiful you are. Jesus. And the falling and the tearing away, it's not a negative thing. Let's turn that around. And let's begin to anticipate what God's going to do. Because I want to tell you this. Yes. When God's in our life, there is nothing you and I cannot handle. Nothing. Jesus. Nothing. That's right. But Pastor, it's so big. Yeah, but we have a big God. Yeah. But Pastor, there seems to be more questions than answers. We have a God that can handle every question and has every answer for us. But sometimes I think I make the wrong choice. I do the wrong thing. We have a God that has grace abundant enough to cover whatever mistake we make, whatever situation we didn't do correctly. We have a God that has big enough grace to pour into that. I want us to think God is big. You hear of problems in people's lives. You pray with the idea that God is able to do whatever we think, imagine, or put together. That's our God. And when we get to serve Him, we get to be a part of His family. He doesn't say you got to fix all these things first. You know what the amazing thing this is? God completely and totally accepts us the way we are. Because He loves us enough to unlock not only the potential, but the reality of who we are. Amen? Isn't that awesome? I want to talk this morning on limitations, facing obstacles in our life. Whenever I preach, one of the hardest things, or one of the things that I want to convey the most, is I want them to be fresh in here. I never want to just preach a message, and I feel like the last months have been just messages, and God's been taking me through some stuff, and I just want to open up the journey that God has and what He's doing, because I know that all of us are facing some of those things like we just talked about this morning here, just briefly before I got into what I want to share this morning. Many of us, and probably all of us, can relate to obstacles or limitations in your life. I don't like limitations. I asked my son the question this morning. We went for coffee before we went to church, and as we drove, I asked him the question. I said, what do you like about life? What do you like about life? What do you like about life? And this is what he said. I like that we don't have to stay the same. We can grow. We can push through challenges. We can learn. If we don't like where we are, we can change it. That's what I like about life. And I said, man, I tell you, that hits me hard, because I'm a person that doesn't like the mundane and the normal. I don't like just doing what everybody else does. And if I'm told that's what I have to do, I get frustrated on the inside. I get discouraged and I get disappointed. And then I think it's not worth doing it. If it's just everybody else is doing it, then I'm not going to do it, because that's not who I am. And I realized for the first time, that's what I love most about life. And yet, those moments can be the most difficult in our life. Because he said something that really sticks out to me, and he said this: because I like when things change and I can grow and learn and explore. I don't know about you, But growing and learning and exploring, something has to happen. I've got to push through limitations. I've got to push through the moments where I'm told I can't do it. I have to learn to navigate my life over the walls that seem to be locked. Too often I've found myself, listen carefully, church, too often I've found myself staring at a doorway that's been locked, and I've had the keys in my hand the whole time. We're not waiting for God to rescue us. We're not waiting for someone to show up in our life and tell us exactly what we need to do and the door will open. Because God's given us the keys. We got to learn to see what key unlocks what lock. And our life opens up. Our destiny begins to unfold before us. That's why it's never about discouraging someone that's not arrived. That's why it's never discouraging someone that just doesn't get it and are working through and have problems and struggles. It's not about that. It's about coming alongside and saying, you're going to make it because it's in you. You have what it takes, and I want to be a champion. I want to encourage you instead of looking at them and say, why don't you get it? What does that do to you when someone says, why don't you just get it? Like, why is it a problem? Doesn't that just encourage you? It encourages me to make a fist and pound the daylights out of them. It's a good encouragement. It's a release, right? What does it do? It deflates us. When people remind us of our weakness, it deflates us. When people remind us of the problems we have, it deflates us. But when we have the attitude that they are a champion, and they're beautiful in the sight of God, and their destiny is about to explode in their life. You speak to that level. They're able to face the doors of their lives, find the keys because they're empowered to look, and they're digging and finding the answer. When they find the answer, they open up, and their world opens up to them. Yes. What is it that you like about life? Sometimes that's the greatest obstacle. I think sometimes we look at sports figures and celebrities and people that have arrived in the world, okay, where they've arrived, they've made it. We look at them, we model them, we think we need to pattern our life after them, but they didn't get there by accident. They didn't get there by chance. They didn't wake up one morning and all of a sudden, the Edmonton Oilers phoned and said, we want to sign you for $3.5 million a year. It doesn't happen that way. Where does that happen? It happens when you're 3 years old and 5 and you have a passion for hockey. And your parents have enough money, hallelujah, to get you involved. And you play on that level. And you make mistakes. And you wipe out. You learn and you give up and you get back going again. And all of a sudden things start clicking. And then your kids come to you, not my kids, okay? Then your kids come to you and say, I think I want to go to hockey school. I want to prove a little bit of here, a little bit of here. And you're thinking they want to push through limitations. So you put them in hockey school and they learn a little more skill and a little more thing. And then they get into a little higher league of hockey and they play a little different and they're learning as they're going. And there's times where they're injured and they're sitting on the sideline watching other people play and they desperately want to be there, but they know they have to work through the situation that's currently in their life. And so they work through injuries and then they get back and they play again. It's amazing how the body recovers. It's amazing. We have to give it time. And sometimes we're so much in a hurry to want to get where God wants us to go that we really hurt ourselves even more. And so we have to sit in the sidelines and recover and just allow the body to do what it needs to do and then to learn more skill. And all of a sudden they start standing out. Every parent wants their kid to make the NHL. Everyone does. The reality is they probably won't. But we don't tell them that. We tell them you go after your dream. You be the best that you can be. You go and you change your life with the idea of changing someone else's life. They may not make the NHL, but they will learn a skill of speaking life into people that they work around and play around so that they begin to speak into their destinies. And all of a sudden, they play in a league where they're noticed. And they're noticed, and they're noticed, and they're noticed. And then they're invited to a tryout. And then all of a sudden, They have an entry-level contract. Doesn't mean they're going to play. It means they're on the list. You see, everybody's journey is different. But those journeys involve a process. And in that process always involves failure, disappointment, retracting, re-going at it again, trying it over. Don't let the distractions of the resets, of the failures, of the struggles distract you from reloading and going again. I want to talk this morning on limitations. What are your limitations? What are your limitations? I think one of the biggest, I want to go into John chapter 15, but one of the biggest limitations that we face is our mindset. We will always go in the direction we believe. If we believe we can't do it, we're not going to try. Sometimes the limitations in the mind are really subtle. You don't notice them until a pattern has developed. And then you see a pattern, you wonder how in the world did it ever get there? But that's the neat thing about a pattern. It starts small and it starts working through your system, and pretty soon it influences you. And so it's not just a matter of not doing it. It's a learning to change the pattern in your life and how to shape it. And that purpose and that process is just as important, and that's why we celebrate our failures and disappointments, because they're part of us releasing us into our destiny. Does that make sense? See, that's not a negative, it's a positive. What are your limitations? I can never achieve that. It doesn't matter how hard I work, I'll never achieve that. Do you know that sometimes we are our worst enemies? Do you realize that there's not a day that goes by that I look in the mirror and ask myself, am I big? I asked my wife today. I put on this sweater. I said, does it make me look big? Yes. Oh, thank you. My confidence is now just up a little bit higher. We have expectations. We compare ourselves. We beat ourselves up because we don't value the process. We don't value the process. I'm telling you, limitations are part of that process. My wife and I, can I inject a funny story? Just to illustrate this. My wife and I have been married 28 years, and for the last 5, it's been great because I've always had the right answers. And so as long as she says yes, it's sweet. And I've had to learn patience, don't get me wrong, but of course that's not true. We have a garbage can in the bathroom. Most people have garbage cans in the bathroom. And so I don't steal my story. I'm up here. And so I went into the washroom 3 days ago, and I noticed there was no bag in the garbage. And I thought, wonder why she, listen to my rationale. Wonder why she hasn't put a bag in there. I'm standing there looking at it. Never mind. Never mind. You're stealing my story. I wonder why she hasn't changed the bag. I thought, okay, then I'll just put it beside the garbage can. So I did. And then I went on the day, and I went in the washroom again and used it, and I was like, oh, there's still no bag. So then I put it beside, thinking, she's going to get it yet, right? Okay. And then the third day came, this morning, and I thought, there's still not a bag in the garbage can. And then I walked away, and I thought, that's often our problem in life. We see a limitation. We see an obstacle. And all we do is stare at, hoping someone will deal with it. When how simple it is, all I do, I walk in the kitchen. I even know where the bags are. Because I've changed them before. Why is this one an issue? I don't know. Man, people are really persecuting me right now. What is so hard about going into the kitchen where the bags are, taking a bag out, which I did this morning. If you come over, I'll show you the bag is in the garbage can. And then I took all the stuff beside it and put it in there. And then I had this thought, was that so hard? No. I just became a part of the solution rather than highlighting the problem. I didn't phone her up. Well, I finally changed it, just so you know. Next time, pay more attention. But that's what we do. So I became a part of the solution rather than elevating the problem. And the reason I'm saying that is it's not that I don't change the garbage bags and put them in there. It's just for some reason, I just assumed she was going to do it. And so I lived with that expectation, and that expectation wasn't being met. So it was like it became an obstacle. Why isn't she changing it? While I'm standing there fully capable of getting involved in the process, bringing change. Limitations. What are your limitations? Maybe it's relationships. Maybe it's people in your life that haven't treated you very good. That's a limitation. You're afraid to step out because you're afraid to get criticized because you always have. You're afraid to step out. What is your limitation? Maybe you're at work thinking that this is as far as you can go at work. You can't go no further. And you're frustrated inside because you want more, but you think you can't get more. What are your limitations? Helen and I watched a movie here, I would say about 6 weeks ago. It's a movie about a guy that started very young mountain climbing. And it's not mountain climbing like you and I know mountain climbing. It's mountain climbing where it's scaling cliffs with no ropes. The only rope is he carries with him, and as he gets to a certain height, he pounds in the safe harness and he clicks it in, and then he goes and climbs. And what was amazing to me was there's this one sheer cliff called the Dawn Wall. And they call it the Dawn Wall because early in the morning, in dawn, the cliff lights up with the morning sun. It's never been scaled before. No one has ever climbed it. And he got in his mind, I'm going to be the first. And so he tackled it. He tackled it over months, over months, over months, over months. Years. There was camera crews, and this is the time he's going to make it, and he failed. And then he was doing real well, and what happened is he got his finger caught in one of the rocks. And as he slipped his footing, it tore his finger off. And there he hung. And everybody told him, that's it, you're done. You need your fingers, because that's all he climbs with, his toes and his fingers. He said, I'll never be done. He looked at his limitations and says, it can be done, and it will be done, and he tackled it. He was the first man ever to scale that cliff wall by scaling with his hands and his feet. I want to show the trailer because I really want to get us a glimpse of this story, because in this trailer, it really highlights the limitations that not only he faced, but he constantly heard by people around him. It can't be done. You're crazy. Don't even start. You're going to get yourself killed. What are y'all doing for fame and glory? But there's a few people in his life that believed in him and said, if anyone can do it, you can do it. And they championed him all the years that he attempted and tried. And they shared in the glory when he reached the top to be the first man, first climber to ever do it. Let's watch the trailer, and then I want to go into John chapter 15.
When you see El Capitan for the first time, it takes your breath away.
Early in the morning, there's this one panel of the wall that illuminates first, the Dawn Wall.
It has never been climbed until Tommy Caldwell came along. Nobody had actually considered trying it.
It's like stepping off the edge of the earth.
I guess the question here is, why are you doing this?
I was this very fragile little kid.
He didn't crawl till he was over 2.
I think my dad felt the best way to prepare this kid for the world was to toughen him up a little bit. And so he took me on all the craziest climbing walls you could ever do, and he did it with a 6-year-old. By the time I was 14 or 15, there was climbs that I could do that my dad couldn't.
Tommy became one of the best young climbers.
And then we got invited to Kyrgyzstan to rock climb. And all of a sudden, we were hostages.
After being held captive for 6 days, 4 young Americans confront the ultimate choice: to kill or be killed.
He saved our lives.
But he became a different person.
Ever since Kyrgyzstan, I just have this fire in me. This has always been my safe place. my way to deal with life. And was looking across at the dawn wall. The last unclimbed big swath of stone. I decided maybe that could be climbed. I needed a partner.
Kevin, he was one of the best in the world at only up about 30 feet.
But everybody else thought I was crazy.
At this point, I have no idea what I'm getting into. It's about to consume 6 years of my life.
This is a pipe dream, man. Come on.
Nothing left to do but just take a couple deep breaths.
If Tommy and Kevin can actually do this, it will be, come on, the most difficult climb ever done. And it's going to go on day after day.
Suddenly the whole world was watching.
And one of them stuck. It was pretty clear that was it.
I don't want to hold you back.
Maybe this climb really was impossible. We are capable of so much more than we could ever imagine.
Did you hear that? We're more capable of doing what we can imagine. He had faced limitations. How many times you heard it's a pipe dream? How many times you heard it's impossible? And yet he climbed it. He did the impossible. In John chapter 15, there are a few things that I just want to read and highlight in regarding to facing obstacles in our own life. In John chapter 15, starting in verse 1, it has these words. It says, I am the true gardener, and my Father, I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch. Now, that's an interesting word. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit. Well, every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes so that it be more fruitful. Next slide. You are already clean because of the word that I've spoken to you. Then he says in verse 4, remain in me, and I will remain in you, for no branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. And then verse 5, listen to verse 5. He says again, I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me, and I in you, you will what? You will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. When we read that passage of Scripture, there are several things that really come to my mind. First of all, God reminds us of our role. He reveals our identity. How important is understanding our identity? If we don't know who we are, we tend to be floaters. We tend to be people that don't know what is and what isn't, and we're trying to find ourselves, and then we often look for all kinds of other things to fulfill what we're trying to find what fills us. But when we know who we are, we face life with a confidence. We face life with a knowing. And so here, Jesus begins by highlighting the fact he lets us know who we are. He says, I am the vine, I'm the life, I am the source, I'm everything that the branch needs to succeed and do well. That's who I am. You're the branches. You're the one that have your life inside of me. What I have to give, you get to receive. And as you receive, you reap the benefits of it because the fruit happens as a result. We're not obstacles in life. We're a channel through in which God can pour whatever He is. It's interesting. We lived in Vernon, BC for 6 years, and we walked the vineyards and seen all that aspect of it. And it's amazing. The vine is the life source. The branches cannot function without the vine. But you'll soon recognize that in order for fruit to develop, there's obstacles. There's limitations that have to happen in order for that to take place. And part of that process is the gardener goes and makes sure he or she prunes things and makes sure there's not more green leaves than there are fruit availability. And so they come and they cut things off and trim it and that kind of stuff. And so when Jesus is talking in John 15, he's talking in a context where he's walking with his disciples through a vineyard. Just moments or days before he was going to be arrested and then later crucified. But those moments he walked through, Jesus took the opportunity to teach them some very important things as they seen it. I can almost picture Jesus, this is what I am to you. I have everything available for you to succeed and bear fruit. Everything. The only thing is, if the branch is not a part of the vine, it can never receive what the vine has to give. But it's interesting here. As I speed this up, he says, I'm the vine, you're the branches in me. He says in verse 2 an interesting word, and I made reference to it. He says, he cuts off every branch in me that doesn't bear fruit. What does he mean by that? Does he just cut us off? If we don't reach and match, does he just cut us off and discard us? No. Absolutely not. There's two ways of looking at this word in the Greek language. It's the word airo. It's easy to say. It's hard to pronounce when you look at the Greek letters, but airo is simple. It has more of a connotation to it than it means cutting off. Rather, it means coming alongside and lifting up. The other way you can look at it too, and perhaps maybe the translators thought of it that way, and that's why they translate it this way, is to cut off. They remove all the things that hinder us from being who God designed us to be. He doesn't cut us off. He cuts off all the things that are limiting us, that are holding us back from being that channel in which we can receive everything God has for us. Either way, both of them really capture what I want to say this morning when we face limitations is the fact that God believes in us enough to make sure He walks us through the process of growth and bearing fruit. That's what's awesome about it. We're not left alone and we have to figure this thing out, but He comes alongside us because the gardener is very interested in his orchard. He takes it personally. He looks after. Why? Because he knows at the end of the season, he can pay his bills. What are our limitations? He comes alongside and lifts us up. I like that word better because this word airo is used many times in the New Testament. This is the only time it's ever translated cut off. Only time. Because that's what God does. He lifts us up. He sees that we've been hindered by dirt and mud and storms come through and the branches are laying down and not really exposed to the sun. And so He comes alongside and He lifts those branches up, cleans the leaves off so there's full sun exposure because He knows that branch is going to produce fruit because it's only natural. Because if it's connected to the vine, fruit is an automatic result of it. He's not taken by surprise. He knows that those things in life come around and these things happen, but He comes alongside and picks us up where people are telling us it's impossible, it won't work. He's telling us it will work because you're connected to me. As long as you're connected to me, it'll always work. That's the thing. We need to stay connected to the source. And He doesn't withhold anything from us. Whew. The sky is truly our limits. And really that isn't even limits. And then He says this in closing. He cuts off every branch. He lifts it up. Picture that in your mind. He looks at you with value and purpose. This is abnormal. It's normal for them to be healthy and always getting everything they need. So I'm going to make a way possible that continues to happen. I'm going to remove those limits. I'm going to remove those obstacles that we have to go through and face as part of our success. I remove all those things. And then He says this. After He says that, the message I've given you will clean you, will prop you, and remain in me, and I will remain in you. As a branch cannot produce fruit by itself. And then He says in verse 5, yes, I'm the vine, you're the branch. How many times does He remind us who we are? In those 5 verses, I'm just guessing there's at least 3 times He reminds us, I'm the vine, you're the branches. You are full of the potential that I give you. Whew. What are your limits? What are your limits? I can't get past that. What are your limits? He says, the last part here, those who remain in me means to be stuck, to be solidly engrafted. Those that remain in me, He says, will bear much fruit. Your destiny is way bigger than your mind can imagine it to be. I'm going to ask you the same question I asked my son. What is it that you like about life? Is it that you can push through and you can change and you can shift and you can grow and you can experience everything that God has? It's going to involve limitations. But God's created us to push through those limitations. Are there moments that we face? Oh yeah, it's not going to work. There's moments of that. But that's just to reset us. That's just to reset us. Maybe we don't see this landscape like we are. We get resetted and we look at something different and we go at it. Be the champion that God created you to be. When you see people, see them as champions that God's created them to be. See them that way. It'll change everything about us. Let's pray. Father,